Good evening, Chairman and Commissioners. Item number 34 on tonight's agenda is for approval of a resolution adopting the findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendation of the Administrative Hearing Officer for removal for cause of Hall County Planning Commission members Chris Braswell, Stan Hunt, and Frank Sosebee, and for other related matters. As the board is aware, on December 17th, 2025, a public hearing was conducted by a hearing officer designated by the board to hear written charges for removal for cause of the named Planning Commission members by Hall County's Special Counsel Thomas Mitchell. That hearing included the presentation of evidence and testimony and was conducted in accordance with the procedure required under the applicable county code. On January 2nd, 2026, the hearing officer submitted his report with findings of fact, conclusions of law, and a recommendation for removal for cause of the named planning commissioners. The proposed resolution before you would adopt the hearing officer's findings, conclusions, and recommendation and would remove planning commission members Chris Braswell, Stan Hunt, and Frank Sosebee from office for cause. The resolution also provides for training of existing and future planning commission members on the requirements of Georgia's open meetings and open records laws and Hall County's Code of Ethics before the Planning Commission is reinstated from its suspension. Before the board considers adoption of the hearing officer's findings and recommendation through the proposed resolution, a public hearing will be conducted before this board to allow Hall County Special Counsel Thomas Mitchell and the Planning Commissioner's attorney Tony Powell to address this board. Each side will be allowed 10 minutes to present argument to the board. Mr. Mitchell will proceed first, followed by Mr. Powell. No public participation will be allowed. At this time, I recognize the County Special Counsel, Thomas Mitchell, to begin his presentation. Mitchell, if you'll just state your name and address for the record.
Thank you, Justin. Sir. Thanks, sir. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Same thing. Well, no, I'm waiting. Chairman, members of the commission, my name is Thomas Mitchell. My address is 1809 Beaufort Highway, Beaufort, Georgia, 30518. I'm only going to speak for a couple minutes and reserve the rest of my time to respond to Mr. Powell. But I will say briefly, you received my report. Initially, you authorized the hearing that happened. The sworn testimony that was given in that public hearing validated what the employees had told me during the interviews that I conducted. And that testimony and the video evidence presented showed that 6 times during 2025, 3 of the planning commissioners members attended and participated in an illegal meeting that was not advertised, for which there was no agenda and no minutes taken. Using the terms of the law, they received presentations regarding planning commission business. They discussed planning commission business. And in one particularly troubling piece of testimony, Ms. Ahmed testified that on one occasion they had orchestrated a vote to occur at the public meeting. These meetings occurred on April 7, May 5, July 21, July 29, August 4, and August 12. The hearing officer's findings and conclusions, which Mr. Lawhon referenced, was received by you. He recommends approval. That report speaks for itself. He basically concludes and finds exactly what I just outlined to you, and that it violated the law, and that based on that violation recommends their removal. This body, I believe, is authorized by its own code to conclude that this is for cause and that those planning commissioners, Braswell, Hunt, and Sosebee, can be and should be removed. I'll reserve the rest of my time. Frankly, you've got the report, and this hearing was to give the planning commissioner's attorney the opportunity to present any objections or argument against you adopting that report. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, my name's Tony Powell. It's 10 Lumpkin Street, Lawrenceville, Georgia. I have the real distinct pleasure and honor of representing Chris Braswell. and Frank Sosebee and Stan Hunt. And I could say a lot of things about them. I've known them for a couple of months. I've enjoyed that. They've been good witnesses to me. They are good Christian people. And when I thought about vouching, I don't really need to do that because you know them better than I do. And you know the quality of what they've done for this county. And in the roles for a cumulative total of 45 years that they've served. And they have been through some really trying times over the holidays. I have asked them to, in what I think is the correct biblical stance, is to hold their tongue and let their efforts be defended by the person that they trust most. And I'm reminded of a biblical situation where there were 3 guys who were thrown into the fire similarly. And my favorite part of that story is that after they were retrieved from that scene of being in the fire, the scripture says you couldn't even smell smoke on them. And when this is done, regardless of what happens here, these 3 guys have reputations and standing in this community with their churches and with their friends where you're not even going to smell smoke on them because they are honest, they do the very best they can, and they've done a great job for 45 years. One thing that is not in your report, and that is there is an exception to the Sunshine Law, or the Open Meetings Act. It's contained in OCGA 5014-3 under exceptions. Situations where the Open Meetings Act do not apply. None of those requirements apply. And this is it. Staff meetings held for investigative purposes under duties and responsibilities imposed by law. That's it. Now, when I asked staff about that, they said, yeah, never heard of that before. Nobody's advised us on that exception to the Open Meetings Act. But I got to cross-examine them. You can look in the transcript. All of them that testified that day, there were 3 members of your staff. They said, yeah, that's what we did. Yes, that's what we did. They consulted with us on planning procedures and expertise that private people don't have in an investigative way. And then they passed along information to the planning staff for them to investigate within your departments information they needed for conditions to be drafted correctly. As you did tonight, it's hard to do those things in real time with people waiting for you to make a decision. And your 45 years of experience planning commissioners did that within a staff meeting within the law. If anybody had any questions about that, all they had to do was say, let's have a work session. Let's have a work session. The burden of everything that these planning commissioners have been charged with, posting an agenda, posting the door, preparing minutes, giving notice, advertising, they didn't do any of that. That was not their responsibility. It was planning staff's responsibility. And I know, because I've sat in the seat that you're sitting in, I know that you don't pay attention to those things either. Somebody does that for you. Somebody does that compliance for you. And Frank and Chris deserve to be able to rely on those people to meet those requirements if they even think there might be a need to do those things. No skin off anybody's. There's an exception, and then there's a responsibility. And I say all those things just to say you got good planning commissioners and good volunteers, and you should support them. I say this because it's really important, and that is we're on the wrong page constitutionally and procedurally. And I don't want to upset anybody in this description, but for open meetings violations, the state has established a procedure, and local bodies can't vary that procedure. And the reason is a constitutional standard. That constitutional standard is This law is a statewide law. It applies to everybody. And so if one jurisdiction starts making up special rules, like you make one mistake with the Open Meetings Act, you're removed from office. If everybody starts varying those terms, then the law is not equal within the state. And this state constitution specifically provides that local government can't do what you're doing. It can't take the Open Meetings Act and create a new procedure and then create a new standard of evidence and then create a new standard of punishment. You have to go by the rules. So if you've got an open meetings violation, you have to go to one place jurisdictionally under state law, and that's to the Superior Court. The reason is fairness of a hearing. You are the judge. You are ultimately, and the only standard before you is this standard. The Board of Commissioners, not some hearing officer, have the authority to remove any member for cause on written charges after a public hearing. All of that public hearing should have been done in this room with you present, you as the judge, and we just varied off into this no man's land of no rules. The Open Meetings Act is done under the rules of civil procedure. 80% of what you have in this record is hearsay. It's uncontested. It's unreviewed by cross-examination. It was dumped in the record in just a dump at the end of the hearing. There was no cross-examination of people. It was videos outside of court. None of that would have been allowed into evidence in a case in the Superior Court. But in this, now it doesn't say in your code you can do that. It gives no standard whatsoever. So you're using a procedure that is not authorized by state law. It's not even authorized by your code to convict 3 guys who have been doing their job and who, even under the Open Meetings Act, would have been not even charged, to be honest with you, because every accusation is beyond the 90 days of the statute of limitation. And the reason is nobody can remember what's going on in this situation. And so there are cases, there's really one case that where people were, there was a finding in a court of law that said, hey, you can be removed from office. And what happened in that case was a commission in North Georgia approved raises for themselves and raises for their department heads in a closed meeting. That's what it was. It was illegal beyond just the open meeting. They did it in a secret meeting.
If you're talking to the microphone, just to make sure we get it.
Yes, sir. Here's the point that we made at staff level, and that is there's been precise calculations of when planning commissioners came off the elevator and went into the staff meeting. Now, I believe it's clearly staff meetings are authorized. They were authorized to be in there. They didn't have to do any of those compliance issues. But secondly, it's when 3 people are there, what was said. I mean, there are 11 accusations. What was said? If you look back at your transcript, your staff was genuine in saying, well, we can't really tell you what happened in those minutes. Well, that's the standard. Now, what can happen in those minutes with planning commissioners that rise to the level of being removed from office? They only make recommendations. I think you know these 3 guys were doing the very best they could. They didn't do anything in those minutes, but what is conclusive on that issue is nobody else can remember what was said either. And it should have been something. You should have in front of you, if you're going to remove people for cause, you should have in front of you words where they've done something wrong, where there's been a breach of trust, where there's been something done. Now, planning commissioners can't really do that, but when they get to that point of being removed, there should at least be the language of what was said.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Planning commissioners may be good men. I talked to each of them for about an hour each, and they were quite pleasant. But there's also a biblical principle that you're supposed to obey the laws of the land. The hearing officer has found that these three gentlemen did not do that, and there's a consequence for that. One of the things that I would note, and that the hearing officer noted, is that they didn't even show up at this hearing to defend themselves or explain their actions. In fact, Mr. Powell tried to elicit a good faith defense, and the hearing officer, if you read his findings and conclusions, specifically found, I can't evaluate good faith because they didn't bother to show up. The exception for staff meetings for investigation purposes, the hearing officer specifically addresses that both in his findings of fact and in his conclusions of law. In paragraphs 60 to 62 of the findings on page 8, and in paragraphs 22 to 27 on pages 11 and 12, he addresses that. And he specifically finds this was not a staff meeting for investigative purposes, and he explained why it wasn't for investigative purposes. And he says because that's an exception to the Open Meetings Act, it has to be construed narrowly. So if I can't conclude clearly that it falls within that exception, the Supreme Court has told me that I've got to construe it narrowly, and therefore I conclude that it was not a staff meeting for investigative purposes, aside from the fact that it's not a staff meeting because there's a quorum of the planning commissioners there. He talked about the staff's duties, and while all that is true, the planning commissioners had a legal obligation not to participate in an illegal meeting, and that is exactly what they did. And it was an illegal meeting because not only is a meeting comprised of voting, it's also comprised of presentations of the business of the commission and discussion of the business of the commission. And the testimony by the staff, Mr. Powell talked about the hearsay that was put into the record. All of those staff members that I talked to, I brought them into this room, put them over there, put them under oath, and had them testify to the facts of the case. And the planning officer said that their testimony corroborated what the video showed. And what they said was, and on those occasions when three planning commissioners were present, Mr. Braswell, Mr. Hunt, and Mr. Sosebee, what happened was they talked about the agenda for the upcoming meeting, the business of the planning commission, and they talked about the conditions, just like you all discussed conditions tonight. That's the heart of what the planning commission is supposed to do, is determine what kind of conditions on those items to recommend to you all. And so it was clearly within. And so their obligation, their duty, was not to participate in an illegal meeting, and that is what they did. Mr. Powell said that that we have to go to Superior Court first. If one of your employees is caught stealing, Mr. Probst or the department head or even that person's supervisor is going to fire him. He's not going to wait till there's a conclusion by either the state court or the Superior Court that they engaged in theft. And again, the hearing officer specifically addressed this in his conclusions of law, paragraphs 7 through 11, that he did have jurisdiction to consider this matter and that it was proper, that this administrative proceeding, this for-cause proceeding to remove these planning commissioners was separate and apart from anything that could have been pursued in Superior Court. Mr. Powell, the last thing he said was, well, we don't know what words they said. Well, what we do know from essentially the undisputed testimony of your current planning director, Katie Ahmed, is that what these pre-planning meetings were for, when there were three of them there were illegal meetings, was to talk about the agenda for the upcoming meeting. And that's what they did every single time, even on those occasions when it was just Mr. Braswell or just Mr. Braswell and Mr. Hunt. The problem is that 6 times in 2025, it wasn't just Braswell, and it wasn't just Braswell and Hunt, it was all three of them. And on those occasions, she said specifically, and behind tab number 2, what you've got in the notebook I handed you is highlighted testimony from the hearing, testimony under oath, where Katie talks about what happened in those meetings. And I specifically said, same thing happened when 3 of them were present, the times that you remembered, and she said yes. talk about the agenda. So we know what they did. They talked about the upcoming agenda, the agenda for the next meeting after the April 7th, after the May 5th, after the July 21 and July 29 meetings, after the August 4 and August 12 meetings. They were talking about the agenda for the upcoming Planning Commission meeting. They were talking about the conditions. That is the business of the Planning Commission. And they participated in these illegal meetings, and the hearing officer so found, and he has recommended. And the hearing officer also in a separate paragraph on the last page, on page 13, also pointed to the constitutional provision, what he calls the public trust provision of the Georgia Constitution, that says public men and women above all others must act in good faith. Well, this is what the court has said in interpreting that provision. Neither facile excuse nor clever dissimulation can serve in the stead of duty faithfully performed, because public men and women are amenable at all times to the people. They must conduct the public's business out in the open, and a failure to perform that duty can be ground for recall from public office. Of course, this isn't a recall. We don't have to go through all those procedures, but what your code says is that if you find cause, you can remove these 3 planning commissioners. The sworn testimony at the hearing and the findings and conclusions of the hearing officer support that, and I would urge you to vote to remove Braswell, Hunt, and Sosebee from the Planning Commission.
This concludes the public hearing.
It's very unfortunate that we're in this position. But here we are. And when you take certain positions and you know what your job is, and you choose not to go by the rules, you have to be held accountable. I'm the chairman of the commission board, and I know the rules. We don't meet illegally 3 commissioners. I would not do it. And if you've been on a board 22 years and you don't know it, we have a serious problem. I've known them all for 20 plus years, and I love every one of them. But I know a lot of good people that do crazy things. And I'm not happy to be here in this situation, and I don't think anybody on the board is. But as a leader, you have to make hard decisions. And if I do wrong, you hold me accountable. I'm giving you permission to do that right now. I take oath of office very seriously. It's an oath for a reason. And if you can't uphold that, you need to resign. So I think the report's pretty clear for me. I'm not pointing fingers at anybody, but we spent tons of money actually trying to defend them and give them every opportunity to prove their innocence. God knows that. I've never said one bad word about anybody on this board or on the planning or anybody else. And I'm frustrated because it took 4 months to get to this point. And taxpayer money that we've spent. Only you, when you do wrong, know you did wrong. You know it. You don't have to be told. So I'm very, very, very frustrated. And if any one of them called me right now, I'd do anything in the world for them. It has nothing to do with that. This is business. This is not about a last name. This is not about popularity. This is about a business and doing your job. And if you can't do your job, you're going to answer to God, not me. But I'm going to do my job. And I'm going to take care of business for Hall County. That's why I'm here. That's why you voted for me and put me in office. So let's be clear. We're not happy to be here. We're not happy to even have to deal with this. But here we are. We have to deal with it, and we have to make hard decisions. And if it was my own son, I would deal with it. In more of a manner than what we have to do here. I promise you. Because you know why he don't? He knows better. So with that being said, I have nothing further. Do we have any more discussion?
I'd like to say to Mr. Powell, when you were here the other day, you were quick to call out my name and Commissioner Gibbs that we had prejudged this. Every bit of this evidence we had before we done any of this. So to say we prejudged it, we just knew before you knew. So there was no prejudgment. We have not said anybody's guilty or not. To your accusation that we weren't here and we should have been here, we were told not to be here. And if we were here, it'd be our fault if we lost. So it was kind of like a setup. If we lose and you come, it's your fault. I would have loved to have been here and for you to ask me questions
begged to be
where
here.
I could be here. I think it's a travesty that our administration did not live stream this meeting so that the taxpayers could watch it. I think it's a travesty that the way this was done, that we said we had 3 votes when we didn't. I don't know if we voted or not. I know I didn't vote. So to say transparency, I would say I would like to know everything. Also, y'all have said everyone, your clients have said we all knew about these meetings. That's a dang lie. You want to talk about the Lord hates liars. I didn't know nothing about these meetings. I've never been to one of them. I didn't even know where the room was where they were doing it at. So if we want to get down to the technicalities and you want to start using the Lord's name to draw favor or leniency or whatever, I can tell you, you've issued me a lawsuit saying retract your words or else. And I'll just say that I thought that was kind of amusing, to be honest with you, because we hadn't even been able to say anything. Only thing I said is I love them. So if we're going to use the Lord's name, let's use it in the right context, please. And if you want to sue me, go ahead. I reckon I'm game. I'm down with that. I think these men have given a lot of their time, and to say we hate to be here, I tell you, you've pushed me to the point I'm glad to be here. Just to be honest with you, I mean, you mess with a bull, sometimes you get the horns. So I'm just saying, I love these men. I think they've spent a lot of time. And I'll tell you what I seen when I watched that film. It wasn't just that they were in these meetings that bothered me. It's that these men were running the county. I believe they changed staff recommendations. I believe they changed staff approval or denial. I believe that they ran this stuff that way. I do. And if you look at that film, you're like, oh my God, this is happening. That's what I think. I'm not saying I'm right or wrong. I'm telling you what I thought. I cannot say they done that or anything. But why dig in like this? And if it's open and transparent and these were just work sessions, how come all the planning commissioners wasn't invited to it? Why were they not all invited if it's so on the up and we're so good? Boy, we love doing transparency. We're just doing work sessions. Why wasn't everybody invited? Why wasn't everybody on the email? That's what I want to know. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty.
Anything else?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Second.
All in favor?